it is a right old mishmash of stuff on the papers this morning. But the common theme it all has, I guess, is that we're in for a bit of a rough ride over the next month.
I think we can safely say we're in for a rough ride, yes. I think, to me, the bigger story is this story that's been rumbling along for a while now about the Prime Minister and the Chancellor trying to fill a £50 billion black hole in public finances. I think we should take that figure with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because we can tell already that the Chancellor is very much in expectation management mode at the moment. He wants the budget not to seem quite as bad as it's been billed when it finally comes around. But also, to mitigate it slightly, we know that the price of gas is falling a bit. The markets have been calmed by Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister. So that hole isn't quite as big as it was. But it's very big nonetheless. And it's very hard to see what the Prime Minister and the Chancellor can do, which is politically palatable to fill that hole. Of course, Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, wanted to raise national insurance. That's been scrapped, and it doesn't look like he's going to reinstate it. Or if he is, he couldn't even do it for another 6 months. That would be a quick, easy way to raise a lot of money. Another quick, easy way to raise a lot of money would be to scrap the triple lock on pensions. We know that's very, very difficult for Conservative Party, which is already doing badly in the polls. That leaves the only options left, really, to be wide cuts to big spending departments like education, defence, health. But we know that's very difficult to get through Parliament. And it looks like Labour are going to force through votes on every single spending cut that's mentioned in this fiscal statement. So you're going to have very angry Tory MPs who are accountable to their constituents not wanting local school funding per pupil to be cut, watching their MPs vote for that. So it's going to be a really difficult time ahead.
What about windfall tax, though? Because we know we're going to have another windfall tax on the energy companies. Isn't that going to bring in billions of pounds?
That will bring in money, and the good news from that is that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were worried. Lots of Conservative, sort of Thatcherite, growth-focused Conservatives were worried that the windfall tax would stop these big energy companies investing in Britain. They'd just go and move their work elsewhere and not pay tax in Britain at all. It turns out that doesn't seem to be happening too much, so it will bring in some money. But a windfall tax, by its very nature, is temporary. And there's, I think it was the Telegraph this morning, there was a report that it might be extended into up to 30% and into 2028, but can't do much more than that. And, of course, the longer you do it and the deeper it is, the more likely it is that energy companies will just think, well, we don't need to be operating too much in Britain. We don't need to be investing in drilling in Britain, for example. So there isn't that much wiggle room there.
Yeah, 2028 is quite a long time, though. I mean, that would bring in a fair amount of money, wouldn't it?
It would bring in a fair amount of money, yes, as long as you don't have companies deciding just not to operate in Britain or not to operate in Britain as much as before. And yes, it would bring in money, but it's in the single figures of billions, so it doesn't plug that hole. The way that Labour sort of presents it, because obviously Labour would like to, their answer to everything is basically a windfall tax, larger and larger windfall tax on oil and gas companies, which does make sense in some ways, but it's not quite as lucrative as you might think.
Right.
I mean, is a £50 million black hole fillable anyway? I mean, there's not going to be a fix to it, is there?
Well,
it's going to be something we're going to have to live with for decades.
Yes, and I think that particularly, well, from what I gather, Jeremy Hunt is very interested in sort of abacus economics, and he is really concentrated on making sure that those numbers add up exactly and filling that £50 billion hole as fully as possible. Rishi Sunak is a little bit more relaxed. He's a proper fiscal Conservative, but he's not so concerned about making those numbers add up absolutely. And what he wants to do is sort of reassure the markets, politics by vibe, as they call it, make it clear that he is keen on and focused on cutting that deficit, but not necessarily doing it all in one go, not necessarily filling in that hole with, huge measures, which would be very, very unpopular.
But this